Welcome to today's discussion. I'm your host, Jason Fornicola, and my guest today is George Holland, Vice President of the National Security Group and Federal Strategy for Juniper Networks. George, great to see you again.
Good seeing you.
George, what was your biggest takeaway from today's panel discussion?
My biggest takeaway is both industry and government are all in for virtualization. I think the government is making all its plans around how they can leverage virtualization for interoperability, to better increase mission capability, reduce cost, and I think industry understands that, and so I think we're all on the same sheet of music.
Where are the opportunities for virtualization within the federal government? And I know this was talked about a lot on the panel. Detail some of those highlights for us.
So to me, the biggest opportunity for virtualization is to take an age-old decision off the table. In the past, we've had to decide, do we want something to be more secure or do we want it to be more capable for mission? And I think virtualization takes that decision out. We can have both now. We can have more capable solutions and services that are more secure just because of the power of virtualization, automation, and orchestration.
How can industry partners like AT&T, like Juniper Networks, help these government agencies fulfill and ultimately exceed their missions?
So I think there's some roles that we can play while we follow along with where the government wants to go. So the government's setting out some very clear drivers for what it wants in terms of trusted systems, in terms of capable networks and systems. And I think in industry, what we can do is then provide the building blocks for the government to achieve those drivers. We're taking a very hard look at our trusted supply chain. Because if you want to have a trusted system, it all begins with how is your code developed, how are you manufactured, what kind of protections are you putting against gray market, and then how can you disaggregate your software from your hardware? How can you do things to create more better development platforms? So I think what industry can do is provide the really good, trusted, virtualized piece parts that the government then can put together the way they need to for their particular mission.
George, one of the items that came up on the panel was this process to virtualization was just that. It's a process. It's a migration. We're evolving toward that. It's not like an on-off switch per se. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, anytime you go for the on-off switch, I think you're in big trouble because usually the lights go and stay out. I think what we're in now, whether you're talking cybersecurity, whether you're talking virtualization, whether you're talking cloud, I think we're in a long game, and the game has to be played with a lot of what I call disciplined innovation. You've got to innovate and you've got to move forward, but you've got to do it in a way where you don't disrupt what you have already. So most government agencies have legacy systems. They've got a workforce that's trained in certain areas. They've got an acquisition process that's built more toward how things were done before. I think what the government now has to do is take advantage of all the virtualization capabilities, but to start to evolve their processes, whether it's how they buy technology, whether it's how they deploy it, whether it's how they operate it. And I think that's going to have to be done over a long period of time. But I think everybody's going to have to know what the end state is, and we all have to play to that end state.
And ultimately, you're working very hard to help your customers. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So in the national security space, one of the reasons why I love it is because it's not just business and it's not just dollars and cents. I mean, there are very important missions that have to be done to protect this nation. People's lives are at stake every day. And what we're trying to do is not so much focus on what we want to sell, but what needs to be done for that mission. So we're trying to tailor our portfolio, whether it's our hardware, software, or services portfolio, to what the government needs to do to help those people executing the mission get it done.
I'd like to thank my guest today, George Holland, Vice President of the National Security Group and Federal Strategy for Juniper Networks. For WTOP and Federal News Radio, I'm Jason Fornicola.